February 18, 1943. Seattle, Washington. A man named Eddie Allen is about to die. He is Boeing's most experienced test pilot. And right now, at 10,000 feet above the city, he is fighting to save the most expensive airplane in the history of the United States. Engine number 1 is on fire. The metal in that engine is magnesium, a metal that burns at 3,000 degrees. Hot enough to melt through the main wing spar. Eddie Allen knows he has less than a minute. He turns the aircraft toward the runway. He does not make it. 2 miles short, the wing folds. The B-29 rolls, dives and slams into the roof of the fry meat packing plant in the middle of a working-class neighborhood in South Seattle. Eddie Allen dies instantly. The 10 men of his crew die with him. 19 workers and firefighters on the ground die trying to reach the wreckage. 30 dead in one afternoon before this airplane has ever seen combat. But here is what you need to understand. 2 years later, on a night in March of 1945, a general named Curtis LeMay will send 334 of these same airplanes over Tokyo. And in a single night, one night, 100,000 human beings will burn to death. LeMay will turn to his deputy and say the words that will haunt him for the rest of his life. If we lose this war, they will hang us all as war criminals. This is the story of the airplane that killed Eddie Allen and then killed an empire. The story of a $3 billion gamble that ended the greatest war in human history and started the next one. This is the story of the B-29 Superfortress. The year is 1939. Across the Atlantic, Europe is burning. Poland has fallen in 27 days. France will fall in 6 weeks. And in a quiet office in Washington, a small group of American officers is staring at a map and asking a question that will change the 20th century. What if England falls next? What if the Nazi flag flies over London? If that happens, there will be no bases left in Europe, no runways in reach of Berlin. If America wants to strike Germany, she will have to do it from her own soil. Across 3,000 miles of ocean, America needs a bomber that does not yet exist. The Army Air Corps writes the specifications on a single page, and the numbers on that page are impossible. A range of 5,300 miles, a top speed of 400 miles per hour, a bomb load of 2,000 pounds. At altitudes no combat aircraft has ever sustained. No engineer in the world has ever built such a machine. But one company says yes. Boeing. In Seattle, a team of engineers begins drawing an airplane that breaks every rule. A pressurized cabin, so the crew can breathe at 30,000 feet without oxygen masks. Remote-controlled gun turrets, aimed by an analog computer that adjusts for wind, temperature, gravity, and the target's own motion. A wingspan of 141 feet, nearly twice the span of the B-17 Flying Fortress. They call it the B-29, the Superfortress, and it is the most ambitious machine of the war. By the time the first prototype rolls out of the hangar, the United States Army Air Forces have already committed $3 billion to the program. $3 billion in 1942 money. That is more than the Manhattan Project. That is more than the atomic bomb. America is quietly betting more on this one airplane than on the weapon that will end the war. And there is a reason. Because the men at the top already know something the public does not. The atomic bomb, when it is finished, will be too heavy for any aircraft on Earth to carry, except this one. If the B-29 fails, the bomb has no wings. If the B-29 fails, the Manhattan Project becomes the most expensive pile of paper in human history. Two secret gambles, one airplane between them, and the airplane is falling apart. The engine is called the Wright R3T3350 Duplex Cyclone. 18 cylinders, 2 rows, 2,200 horsepower on the early models, climbing to over 3,000 on the versions that will finally reach combat. On paper, it is the most powerful radial engine ever built. In practice, it is a firebomb. The rear cylinders overheat. The crankcase is made of magnesium alloy, a metal that ignites at temperatures ordinary fire cannot reach. And when it burns at over 3,000 degrees, hot enough to melt through the main wing spar. In seconds, a B-29 with a burning engine does not glide down for a landing. It sheds a wing at 10,000 feet and falls out of the sky. The pilots know this. The mechanics know this. The engineers know this. And that is exactly what killed Eddie Allen. Congress calls for an investigation. Boeing is under criminal review. Newspapers ask the question no one wants to answer: is the $3 billion bomber a fraud? And in Washington, one man refuses to let it die. His name is Henry Harley Arnold. Everyone calls him Hap. 5-star general, commander of the Army Air Forces. He is 57 years old, has survived 4 heart attacks, and he believes, with something close to religion, that air power alone can win this war. He fights for the B-29 in every room he walks into. He threatens careers. He rewrites production schedules by hand. He forces Boeing to open new factories from nothing. By 1943, 58,000 people are building B-29s in 5 plants across America, 2 in Washington state, 1 in Georgia, 1 in Kansas, 1 in Nebraska. Most of them have never touched an aircraft before. They are farmers, they are housewives, they are teenagers straight out of high school. Boeing runs schools on the factory floor, 90 days of training, then straight to the line, where they are asked to build the most complicated machine in the history of aviation. And still, the airplane fights back. By April of 1944, Boeing has produced nearly 100 B-29s. Fewer than 15 of them can fly. The rest sit on the tarmac, grounded, waiting for engineers to solve problems no one has ever seen before. Uneven fuel mixture, runaway propellers, cylinders that eat their own valves. Hap Arnold flies to the factory himself. He walks the line. He looks the foreman in the eye, and he tells them, in the flat voice of a man who has run out of patience, that this program will not fail. By mid-April, 150 aircraft are combat ready. They are still dangerous. They are still unfinished. But they are flying. And somewhere in the Pacific, 4,000 miles away, a young colonel named Paul Tibbets is watching a fighter pilot try to shoot him down. And learning something about the B-29 that no engineer at Boeing has figured out yet. Something that will, one morning in August of 1945, save his life. Because the truth about the Superfortress is this: she was never really designed to fight Germany. Every rivet in her airframe, every mile in her range, every pound of her bomb load, every dollar the country had spent on her, all of it was pointed at one country, one island, one emperor, one enemy that America had been preparing to burn since the smoke was still rising over Pearl Harbor. The Superfortress was built for Japan, and Japan had no idea what was coming. April 1944. A B-29 Superfortress lowers her landing gear over a runway in Kharagpur, India. The heat rises off the tarmac, invisible waves. Ground crews stare up at her, shielding their eyes. She is the first of her kind to reach a combat theater. The plan is called Operation Matterhorn, and on paper, it is beautiful. The Superfortresses will fly from India over the Himalayas into secret bases inside China. From there, they will strike the steel mills of Japan, the beating heart of the empire's war machine. President Roosevelt has personally promised Chiang Kai-shek that American bombers will be hitting Japanese cities before the end of 1944. The paper plan is beautiful. The reality is a nightmare. The runways in China are being built by hand. Not by bulldozers, not by cranes, by tens of thousands of Chinese peasants, men, women, and children, carrying stones in baskets on their backs. They break the rock with iron hammers. They flatten the earth with stone rollers pulled by ropes. There is no fuel in China, so the B-29s must fly their own fuel in. Over the hump, the treacherous mountain passes of the eastern Himalayas, where the winds tear at the wings and ice forms on the propellers in minutes. A converted fleet of B-24 Liberators serves as flying tankers. Each gallon of gasoline burned over Japan costs 7 gallons burned getting it into China. A brand new bomber, untested, unreliable, hauling its own gasoline across the highest mountains on Earth. The crews call it the worst duty in the war. And the gasoline is not the only thing being burned. General Joseph Stilwell, the American commander in China, the man they call Vinegar Joe, writes in his private diary that of the $100 million in American gold sent to Chiang Kai-shek to build those airfields, an estimated 50 million has been siphoned off. Not by the enemy, by the Allies, by the corrupt officials inside Chiang's own government. Half of the money America is spending to bomb Japan is disappearing into the pockets of the men America is trying to save. The peasants keep breaking rocks with their hands, and the money keeps vanishing. June 5th, 1944. The first B-29 combat mission takes off from India. 98 bombers. Target: the railroad yards at Bangkok. 5 aircraft crash on the way. 42 make emergency landings. Fewer than 20 bombs land anywhere near the target. The most expensive bomber in the war has just made its combat debut, and it has failed. 10 days later, they try again. 92 aircraft launched from India. Only 79 make it to the staging bases in China. Only 47 reach the target, the Great Imperial Iron and Steel Works at Yawata, on the southern island of Kyushu. It is the first attack on the Japanese home islands since the Doolittle raid 2 years earlier. Exactly 1 bomb hits the target. 1. It strikes a power station half a mile from the coke ovens it was supposed to destroy. In Washington, Hap Arnold does not shout. He does not slam his fist on the desk. He simply picks up the phone and gives the order to relieve the commanding general. By September, a new man is running the show in China. His name is Curtis LeMay, 38 years old, a stocky, cigar-chewing veteran of the bombing campaign against Germany. His nickname among the crews is Iron Ass. He does not smile in photographs. He does not tolerate excuses. And he does not care whether his officers like him. He cares whether the bombs hit the target. While LeMay wrestles with the disaster in China, a second front is opening. In the summer of 1944, United States Marines take 3 small islands in the Western Pacific: Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. The islands are called the Marianas, and on their coral surfaces, 15,000 Navy construction battalions, the men known as the CBs, begin pouring concrete. They build the longest runways in the world, 8,500 feet, cut through jungle and volcanic rock, aimed straight at Tokyo. From the Marianas, the B-29 can reach every major city in Japan. The commander of this new force is Brigadier General Haywood Hansel. Everyone calls him Possum. He is a planner, a theorist, a gentleman. He arrives on Saipan on October 12, 1944, flying a B-29 he has named Joltin Josie, the Pacific Pioneer. He is eager to prove the theories he helped write before the war, the theories of precision daylight bombing, the same doctrine the 8th Air Force is using over Germany. Bomb the factories, cripple the industry, end the war from the sky. November 24th, 1944. 6:15 in the morning. The lead aircraft, Dauntless Dottie, rolls down the runway on Saipan. Her co-pilot is Major Robert Morgan, the same Robert Morgan who flew the famous Memphis Belle over Germany. 110 more B-29s follow her into the sky, 278 tons of bombs. The target is the Nakajima Aircraft Engine Factory in the Musashino district of Tokyo. It is the first mass bombing raid on the Japanese capital since the Doolittle raid. 17 aircraft abort with mechanical failures. 6 more cannot bomb. And then, at 30,000 feet over Tokyo, the rest fly into something no one on Earth has ever encountered. Over the target, the wind is blowing at 120 knots. 120 knots. The B-29s are being swept across Tokyo at 445 miles per hour of ground speed. The bombardiers cannot track their targets. The bomb sites, designed in Massachusetts for the still air of Europe, spin uselessly. The Americans have just flown into the jet stream, a river of wind in the upper atmosphere that no meteorologist in the West has ever measured. A phenomenon so unknown that the B-29 crews are the first human beings in history to feel it at combat altitude in the middle of a bombing run. Of 278 tons of bombs, only 16 strike the target area. The $3 billion bomber has just been defeated, not by the Japanese, but by the sky itself. Hansel tries again and again and again. Through December, through January, the results do not improve. And in Tokyo, the Japanese generals, studying the wreckage of aircraft and the pattern of misses, reach a conclusion that will kill their empire. They decide the B-29 is a failure. They study the cost of building it. They study the small number of bombs actually hitting targets. And they tell their emperor that even a nation as rich as America cannot afford to keep this program going. They also decide that their fire prevention system is working, that their cities of wood and paper are safer than the West believes. They are wrong on both counts, and in mid-January of 1945, the man who is about to prove them wrong steps off a transport plane on Guam, Curtis LeMay. Hap Arnold has done what Hap Arnold always does. He has fired Hansel. He has brought in the man who never smiles. LeMay walks into headquarters, chews his cigar, and stares at the maps for 3 days. He does not speak much. His staff officers watch him from a distance. They know what is coming. They have seen him in Europe. He is calculating. On the 4th day, he calls his senior officers into a room, and he tells them what they are going to do. He is going to take every gun off the B-29. He is going to take out every round of defensive ammunition. He is going to bring them down from 30,000 feet to 5,000 feet. He is going to send them in at night, one after another, in a single file line, with no formation, no fighter escort, and no protection at all. And he is going to fill their bomb bays with a new weapon that some of his own scientists helped design, a small 6-pound tube of jellied gasoline called the M69. Napalm. The staff officers stand in silence. One of them, later, will say the word out loud in a corner of the tent, so quietly that no one else can hear. Murder, but not to LeMay's face. Because LeMay already knows. He turns to his deputy and says the words that history will not forget. If we lose this war, they will hang us all as war criminals. The night of March 9th, 1945. 334 Superfortresses take off from the Marianas. It takes them almost 3 hours just to get into the air. The line of bombers, nose to tail, stretches back into the darkness for hundreds of miles. They cross the Pacific in silence, 2,000 tons of napalm in their bellies. Just after midnight, the Pathfinders arrive over to Tokyo. They drop their fire bombs in a giant X, a burning cross drawn across the most densely populated square miles on Earth. Then the rest of the force comes in behind them, 279 bombers. 5,000 feet above the rooftops, a brisk March wind is blowing off the bay. The wind takes the fire, and the fire takes the city. Within 30 minutes, Tokyo's fire brigades are overrun. Water mains rupture. Trucks are trapped by walls of flame. And then the fires begin to feed on themselves. A firestorm, a column of superheated air, rising at hurricane speed, sucking oxygen out of the streets and pulling human beings off their feet. The temperature at ground level exceeds 980 degrees Celsius, 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Glass melts. Steel warps. Water in the canals boils. And in the sky above, the B-29 crews smell it. At 9,000 feet, they smell it. The smell of 100,000 human beings burning at once. It comes up through the ventilation system. It clings to their flight suits. It gets into their hair, their throats, their lungs. One tail gunner, later, will remember the man beside him, vomiting inside his own oxygen mask. When the sun rises on March 10th, 16 square miles of Tokyo are gone. More than 250,000 buildings are ash. 1 million people are homeless. Between 83,000 and 100,000 human beings are dead. It is the single most destructive night in the history of human warfare. Worse than Dresden. Worse, in a single night, than Hiroshima will be 5 months later. And it is only the beginning. 2 days later, LeMay burns Nagoya. 2 days after that, he burns Osaka. Then Kobe, then Yokohama, then Kawasaki. By June the 15th, the 6 largest industrial cities in Japan have been erased. 290 square kilometers of urban Japan are gone. American losses, 1.9%. LeMay pushes his crews harder than any bomber commander in history, 80 combat hours a month. More than the 8th Air Force flew over Germany. He tells his officers he can end the war with 29s alone. He tells them he does not need an invasion. He does not need a super weapon. He does not need the Navy. He tells them fire will do it. And on the other side of the Pacific, in a lonely airfield in the Utah desert, another commander is preparing a different answer. Wendover Field, Utah, a place so isolated that the comedian Bob Hope, on a USO tour, takes one look at it and calls it Leftover Field. The men stationed there call it something else, the end of nowhere. The base is home to the 509th Composite Group, 15 B-29 crews, hand-picked, sworn to a level of secrecy that terrifies even veterans. Their commander is Colonel Paul Tibbets, 29 years old, a former B-17 pilot in Europe. The pilot who flew General Mark Clark to North Africa before the invasion of Torch. The test pilot who spent months learning what the B-29 could and could do. He carries a code word given to him personally by General Arnold. Silver plate. Any requisition Tibbets signs, any request for men, materials, aircraft, or fuel is stamped with that single word. And no one, anywhere in the United States military, is permitted to question it. His 15 aircraft are different from every other B-29 in the war. The turrets have been removed. The gun ammunition is gone. The armor plating is stripped away. 7,000 pounds of weight deleted. Only the tail guns remain. The bomb bays have been modified with British-designed release mechanisms. The propellers are reversible. Every engine is hand-picked at the factory. The men of the 509th train every day. They fly high, 29,000 feet, 30,000. They release a strange, bulbous bomb, orange, painted like a fat pumpkin, and then they execute one single maneuver, a 155-degree turn, steep violent, diving for speed. They practice this maneuver hundreds of times, over Utah, over Nevada, over through the Pacific. None of them, not one, knows what they are training for. Only Tibbets knows. The crews are told not to talk, not to speculate, not to ask questions. Men who cannot keep their mouths shut are transferred within 24 hours to the Aleutian Islands, to a remote base in Alaska, where, as one officer puts it, you can tell your secrets to the seagulls. While LeMay burns Japan alive from 20,000 feet down, the 509th flies alone, high in daylight, dropping single pumpkin bombs on empty fields. The other B-29 crews watching them are furious. They write a bitter song about the 509th and sing it in the mess halls. Into the air the secret rose. Where they are going, nobody knows. They think Tibbets and his men are cowards. They think the 509th is skipping the war. They do not know that in New Mexico, in a desert town called Los Alamos, a small group of physicists is finishing a weapon that has been designed, from its first blueprint, to fit inside exactly one aircraft on the surface of the planet, the B-29. They do not know that on July 16th, a device will detonate in the desert with the light of 1,000 suns. And they do not know that the pumpkin-shaped bombs the 509th has been practicing with, the ones that look so strange, the ones that fall so oddly through the air, are exactly the same shape and weight as the real weapon. The end of the war is being rehearsed, in the dark, at the end of nowhere, and no one, not the Japanese, not the crews of the other bomb groups, not even most of the men flying the practice runs, has any idea what is coming. 5:30 in the morning, July 16, 1945, a desert in New Mexico, a place called Jornada del Muerto, the journey of the dead man. A steel tower stands alone on the sand. On top of the tower, wrapped in wires and instruments, sits a device the physicists have simply named the gadget. At a bunker 10,000 yards away, a small group of men lies flat on the ground. They wear welding goggles. They have been told to keep their eyes closed and their faces turned to the earth. The countdown reaches 0. The desert lights up, not orange, not red, white. A white so bright that men who have their eyes closed, who have their faces pressed into the sand, still see it through their own eyelids. A soldier 20 miles away, driving down a lonely highway, will later swear the sun rose twice that morning. Then the mushroom cloud climbs, 40,000 feet, 50,000, and a coded telegram is sent halfway around the world to a small coral island in the Marianas, to the desk of Colonel Paul Tibbets. The message is one line: the baby is born. Tinian Island, 1,900 miles from Tokyo. The 509th Composite Group has been arriving on the island from late May through early July. Their B-29s sit on a segregated part of the field, roped off, guarded around the clock by military police who have orders to shoot anyone who tries to look inside a bomb bay. On July 26th, the heavy cruiser USS Indianapolis pulls into the harbor. She has crossed the Pacific at record speed from San Francisco, carrying a lead-lined crate and a canister of enriched uranium. She hands them off in silence. Then she puts to sea, alone, headed for the Philippines. 4 nights later, a Japanese submarine, the I-58, puts 2 torpedoes into her side. The Indianapolis rolls over and sinks in 12 minutes. Nearly 900 men go into the water. Only 317 come out alive. The rest are taken by exposure, by thirst, and by sharks. It is the worst sea disaster in the history of the United States Navy. The ship that delivered the weapon meant to end the war has just become one of the war's last great tragedies. And on Tinian, no one is allowed to say why she was there. Field Order Number 13 is issued on August 2nd. The primary target is Hiroshima. Hiroshima is the headquarters of the Japanese 2nd General Army. It is home to 50,000 troops. It is a supply depot, a communications center, a port. It has been spared from the fire raids, not out of mercy, but because the Target Committee wants clean data. They want an undamaged city, so the scientists can measure exactly what the bomb does. Kyoto was on the original list. Kyoto was removed by Secretary of War Henry Stimson personally over the objections of the Target Committee. Not for its temples, not for its beauty, but because Stimson feared that if America destroyed the ancient capital, Japan would never forgive her and would fall into the arms of the Soviet Union after the war was over. That decision saved 1 million lives in Kyoto, and it moved Hiroshima to the top of the list. August 5th, 1945, late afternoon, on Tinian, ground crews wheel a strange dark object into a loading pit under the belly of a B-29. The object is 10 feet long. It weighs 9,700 pounds. It is painted matte black, with a few instrument fittings and a single American flag decal. They call it Little Boy. Inside its casing sits a uranium-235 core, 1 hollow ring of enriched metal, and 1 solid cylinder, separated by a barrel of cordite explosive. When the cordite fires, the cylinder will slam into the ring at nearly 1,000 feet per second, driving both halves into a single supercritical mass. The result will be an explosion equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT, more power than every bomb dropped in every raid over Germany, combined in a single blast. Above the loading pit, the aircraft's nose has just been painted with a new name. Paul Tibbets has chosen it that afternoon after his mother, a quiet Iowa woman who once told her son that if he wanted to fly, he should fly. Enola Gay. The crew is briefed at midnight. Tibbets speaks for less than 5 minutes. He does not use the words atomic bomb. He tells them only that the weapon they are about to drop is more powerful than anything in human history. He tells them it may end the war. He tells them if the aircraft goes down over enemy territory, they should not allow themselves to be captured alive. The flight surgeon hands out cyanide capsules. At 2:45 in the morning, on August 6th, 1945, the Enola Gay begins her takeoff roll. She is loaded to 65 tons. She uses every inch of the runway. Her co-pilot, Bob Lewis, reaches instinctively for the yoke to help pull her up. Tibbets slaps his hand away. "I'm flying this airplane." She lifts off just before the Coral drops into the sea. 6 hours of flying north. The crew is quiet. Some sleep, some pray. Captain William Deke Parsons, the naval weapons expert, climbs into the bomb bay in flight and arms the weapon by hand, inserting the powder charges that will fire the uranium slug into the target ring. Tibbets, later, will say what worried him most on that flight. It was not the bomb. It was the black powder that Parsons was assembling 12 feet behind his seat. At 8:15 and 17 seconds, local time, over Hiroshima, at 31,000 feet, in air so clear the crew can count the streets, Major Thomas Fireby, the bombardier, 24 years old, from Mocksville, North Carolina, Tibbets' best friend and poker partner since the days of the B-17 in England, presses the release. The bomb bay doors open. Little boy tumbles into the sky. The Enola Gay, suddenly 9,700 pounds lighter, leaps upward. Tibbets throws her into the practiced turn, 155 degrees, steep, diving for speed, running from what he has just released. 43 seconds pass. For 43 seconds, the men of the Enola Gay fly away from Hiroshima as fast as their machine will carry them. At 1,900 feet above the city, at 8:15 and 43 seconds in the morning, the fuses close the final circuit. The cordite fires. The uranium cylinder crosses 18 inches of steel barrel in less than 100th of a second, and the sky behind the Enola Gay opens. The tail position, Sergeant Bob Caron is wearing the polarized goggles the scientists issued. Even through those goggles, the light is unbearable. He describes it later in a single sentence: the fire of 1,000 suns. The shockwave hits the aircraft 9 miles away. It shakes her like a leaf. Then, a second wave, the reflection from the ground, hits her again. The Enola Gay holds together. Tibbets banks the bomber sideways so the crew can see. Below them, where a city stood 43 seconds ago, there is only a churning pillar of dust and smoke, rising past their altitude, climbing to 40,000 feet, then higher, boiling like a pot of oil. Someone in the cockpit says quietly that the war is over. At ground zero, the temperature reaches 7,000 degrees Celsius, 12,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Sand fuses into glass. Iron roof tiles bubble like water. Human beings closer than half a mile from the hypercenter are vaporized instantly, leaving only shadows burned into stone. 70,000 people die in the first minute. By the end of the year, radiation sickness, burns, and injury will raise that number to over 140,000. 3 days later, on August 9th, a second B-29 boxcar, piloted by Major Charles Sweeney, takes off from Tinian with a second bomb. This one is called Fat Man. It is heavier, rounder, a plutonium implosion weapon, the same design that was tested in the New Mexico desert. 21,000 tons of TNT equivalent, nearly a third more powerful than the bomb that killed Hiroshima. The primary target is Kokura, a major arsenal city on the northern coast of Kyushu. Sweeney arrives over Kokura and finds the city covered by cloud and industrial haze. He makes one bombing run. He cannot see the target. He makes a second, a third. Fuel is running low. Japanese fighters are climbing to intercept. Sweeney turns south toward the secondary target, Nagasaki. The clouds are almost as bad, but at the last moment, the bombardier, Captain Kermit Behan, sees a break and a stadium below and calls out that he has the target. Fat Man falls. It detonates at 10:58 in the morning, nearly 2 miles from the intended aiming point, in the Urakami Valley, directly over the Mitsubishi Arms factories. Between 40 and 70,000 people die that morning. Boxcar lands at Okinawa on emergency fuel. Sweeney taxis to a stop, opens the hatch, and finds that his tanks are effectively dry. If he had made one more pass over Kokura, one more circle, one more attempt to find a hole in the clouds, his crew would have gone into the Pacific. In Japan today, there is a phrase for what happened that morning to the people of Kokura. Kokura's luck. It means to be saved from a disaster you did not know was coming. The people of Kokura did not learn, until the war was over, how close their city had come to obliteration. The people of Nagasaki were paying for their good fortune. In Tokyo, the Supreme War Council meets in the Emperor's underground bunker. 6 men. 3 want peace. 3 want to fight on. They argue for hours. The next day, a small group of army officers attempts a coup. They try to seize the palace, destroy the Emperor's recorded surrender speech, and continue the war. They fail. On August 15th, for the first time in the history of Japan, the Emperor's voice is broadcast over the radio. He tells his people that the war is over. Some Japanese soldiers hear the broadcast and commit suicide with their swords. Some kneel in the dirt and weep. Some refuse to believe it is really his voice. On September 2nd, 1945, aboard the battleship USS Missouri, the Japanese foreign minister signs the instrument of surrender, and overhead, at that exact moment, 462 B-29 Superfortresses fly in formation across Tokyo Bay. The war is over. But 3 men who flew this war will carry it in 3 different directions for the rest of their lives. Paul Tibbets will die in November of 2007 at the age of 92. To the end of his life, he insisted that he slept well at night. I made up my mind then that the morality of dropping that bomb was not my business. I was instructed to perform a military mission. That was the thing that I was going to do. Bob Lewis, the co-pilot, wrote 6 words in his personal journal as the mushroom cloud climbed past their altitude. My God, what have we done? Curtis LeMay would build the Strategic Air Command and command the greatest nuclear force in human history. He would say publicly, more than once, without apology, if we'd lost the war, we'd all have been prosecuted as war criminals. 3 men, 3 consciences, 1 machine. The B-29 Superfortress would serve through the end of the 1950s, fly again in Korea over the Yalu River. But her most important legacy is not written in Kansas or in Tokyo. It is written in a Soviet factory in a city called Kazan. Because during the war, 3 damaged B-29s were forced to land in the Soviet Far East. Stalin gave one order: copy them. Andrei Tupolev's engineers took the Superfortress apart, piece by piece, and rebuilt her in Russian steel. The aircraft they produced in 1947 was called the Tupolev Tu-4. She would carry the first Soviet atomic bomb. She would fly under a red star. The Superfortress had ended the greatest war in human history. And in the same moment, she had drawn the map of the war that came next, Eddiscat, $3 billion. 38, 50, 67 destroyed Japanese cities. Over 140,000 dead at Hiroshima, 70,000 dead at Nagasaki, 100,000 dead in a single night over Tokyo. over 500,000 Japanese lives. And one machine designed from the first line on the first blueprint in 1940 to reach across an ocean and burn an empire to the ground. She did exactly what she was built to do. She ended the war, and she showed the world that from that day forward, no city on Earth would ever again be out of reach. The distance between nations would no longer be measured in miles. It would be measured in flight time. That is the true legacy of the B-29 Superfortress. Not the bombs she dropped, not the cities she burned, but the shadow she cast, a shadow shaped like a mushroom cloud that has never quite left the sky above our heads. Not in 1945. Not now. Not ever again.